better sit down. I got some news. I'm getting out, cutting you loose.
Hello, and welcome to an all-new episode of Memphis on the Mark. I am Mark Jones, your host, and I'm very happy to have my special guest, Bart Shannon, with us. Hey, Bart.
Hey, Mark. Great to see you, as always.
Well, thanks for being here on the show.
It was a hard handshake. That was like a Trump handshake, as always.
Well, I didn't try to pull you. So, man, it's great to have you here.
Glad to be here.
We were talking earlier about Jonesboro, the metropolis.
Jones Boogie Rockinsaw?
Is that how you pronounce it?
Jones Boogie Rockinsaw.
Yeah, so you're from Jones Boogie, Arkansas.
I am. I grew up in Arkansas, lived in Forest City, Arkansas, right across the river till I was 12, then Jonesboro High School, college, and then now I've lived here for 26 years. So
have you lived in Memphis longer than you lived in Arkansas?
Yep.
Okay.
So I think I can technically say it's official. I can call myself a Memphian now.
I think you can.
Fair?
I think you've
26
had
years.
both the mileage, the time, and the mileage.
I have almost lived in Memphis the amount of time that Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and Kurt Cobain were on Earth before they died.
Exactly.
In their bodies of work. I can call myself
and let's hope you don't join them anytime
Let's
soon.
hope not. Let's hope not. Because my body of work would just not add up to theirs.
Well, but soon.
Yeah.
Soon. Speaking of bodies
wait to hear
of work,
when my new album drops. I'm sorry.
I can't wait for that. You were working on an incredible documentary.
Yeah, it's been a fun project. It's a documentary on he's a comedian from the 1970s. He's not from the 1970s, but his heyday was the 1970s.
Sure.
His name's Gary Muledeer. But I was a fan when I was a kid. Used to see him on The Tonight Show and movies, and he was always on some sort of comedy show. But he was that comedian, like when Richard Pryor would come on, my dad would kick me out of the room. Because my dad wanted to watch him, but not me. But Muledeer was one of those people he was a clean comic, and so I could share the comedy with my dad, and so it was always stuck in my mind, and then he just kind of stayed in my consciousness and in pop culture over the last 40 years,
right? And
kind of led to this project.
What he does not, obviously Richard Pryor is one of the great comedians of the 20th century. Would you say this guy, Gary, never quite made it as big? Or?
Yeah, I mean, that's the lure of the project for me. He's this guy who has worked for 50 years in show business, and as he likes to call it, he's unrecognizably famous. Sure. He's respected by his peers. David Letterman loves him. Steve Martin loves him. Norm Macdonald loves him. But you ask anybody under 45 years old, and they've never heard of him. He's had a fascinating career. He's 79 years old. He'll turn 80 this year, and he still does over 200 shows a year at 79. And as he said, I can't stop, because the second I do stop, it's over. So he's just constantly churning it out. And it's been a fun process. We've followed him around for 2 years now. I knew Steve Martin had mentioned him in his book, Born Standing Up. And when Steve Martin had first got a show writing for a Smothers Brothers project, Steve Martin said, I didn't know what I was doing. And Tommy Smothers came to me and said, I need a joke for tonight's opening monologue. Can you write it? And Steve Martin said, I knew what that meant, because I wasn't writing. I had writer's block. And he knew it meant you write something or your days are numbered. He said, so he went back to the writer's room, and he's like, just trying to think of something. Nothing came, and he said, and I thought of a perfect joke, and he started writing it, and then he realized, it's not my joke. It's my roommate, Gary Muledeer's joke. So he called Gary, and he said, Gary, you have a great joke. Can I steal it? And Gary said, yeah, sure, go ahead, use it. And he used it, pitched it. They used it on the opening monologue of that show. He said it broke his writer's block, and so we got Steve to tell that story, which is I'm just a comedy fanatic, and so to get to sit down and talk to him for an hour was pretty great.
Well, let's talk about that. So you have interviewed some incredible people for this project.
Yeah, we have
Steve Martin for one.
Yeah, Steve Martin. Jimmy Walker, Kevin Nealon, Louis Anderson, Paul Schaefer, outside of the comedy world, Alice Cooper, Vince Gill, and Amy Grant, because he plays these golf tournaments, and that's where these musicians always sponsor this golf tournament. But the big one we got in December was all because of Indie Memphis.
Really?
Chris Elliott was at Indie Memphis
Yes.
this year, and always a huge Chris Elliott
Sure.
fan. I would not be speaking to you with my mouth if it was not for a man named David Letterman, because I was an insecure kid, didn't know how to speak to people in public, but I aped David Letterman.
Oh, I love Letterman. Man, I would be at school, and we would take a break to watch Letterman's opening monologue on the old NBC show.
Yeah.
And this was in college, and we're doing Greek homework. And it's like, okay, let's take a Letterman break. And we're in South Carolina, so that meant like 12:30.
Yeah.
So we watched like 30 minutes of the show, and then go back and do more Greek homework.
Yeah.
I didn't really do well in Greek, by the way. I passed it, but that's about it.
First of all, what were you doing taking Greek?
That is an effing good question. I was a religion major, and so the thought was I might go to seminary, and
Wow.
you would need to take, for the Presbyterians, Greek and Hebrew.
Wow.
That needs to be done while you're a seminary student. So
You're dropping some knowledge on me.
I thought I'd share how the Presbyterian church works a little bit. That's another point
That's
of this
why
show.
I'm here, isn't it? You're
Yeah.
trying to pitch me on the Presbyterian church. I'm not buying it, mister.
Hey, we're all proselytizing early in the morning. So, but I love Letterman. Especially, I loved him on the whole thing, but the NBC show was classic.
And that's the thing. People, it's like it happens with anybody's career. If they're in show business a long enough amount of time, they become old. Their material becomes pat and kind of normal. But he was so novel in the 80s on those NBC shows. They were so bizarre and weird,
Right.
and weirdos like us were attracted to it because we got it. It's like, this is not on, nothing's been like on TV like this before. And so as he got older, it got a little more mainstream and normal. But I still watch some of those old shows. And back to Chris Elliott.
Right.
Chris Elliott was a writer on the Letterman show, and used to do some great, iconic characters. His
Man Under the Stairs.
Man Under the Seats. I used to love his Marlon Brando. But he was his daughter had a film at Indie Memphis this year,
Right.
and he and his whole family were in it. And so when I found out about that, I called Joey Carr and I said, Joey, I need to get in a car with Chris Elliott. I said, I'll be the family driver.
But don't we all?
We all do.
But you had a purpose.
Yeah, I said, I'll do whatever I had to take. I'm a huge Chris Elliott fan. I need to get in the car. So when they got in for the festival, I picked the family up, and I wasn't going to put a hard sell on him, but I knew he still had connections. Letterman is an incredibly loyal person to old friends and people he grew up with, people he respects. So. I was going to I knew I'd be driving him around for a few days, so I didn't say anything. But right off the bat, he said, he asked me about myself and, if I was a filmmaker and what I was working on. So I told him, working on this documentary on Gary Mule Deer. He's like, I know Gary. I was like, do you now? What a surprise. And then we talked about it a little while, and I left him alone for a few days. And when the festival was over, I was taking him back to the airport. And crazy, incredibly nice guy.
Oh, yeah.
Just funny on camera, off camera. He's he likes to make people laugh. So I'm taking him back to the airport, and he says, I have Mary's contact. I talked to her the other day. Mary is David Letterman's assistant, has been for 30-something years. He goes, how about I just reach out to her and tell her about this project and tell her it's something that Dave might be interested in. I was like, that'll be, I mean, sure. And you know how it is. We've all been told things like that in our careers. It's like, stick with me, kid, you're going to be a star, and the phone never rings. But I dropped him off, get home, and his wife says, Chris wants your email address because he wants to email Mary tomorrow, and he did. And immediately Dave said, yeah, that sounds like fun. So in December, we went to New York and sat down for 2 hours with David Letterman.
I was jealous when you did it, and I'm still jealous now.
It was phenomenal. Like I said, as someone who grew up just being an icon in my life and an idol, for him to walk in the door cracking jokes, and then sat there for 2 hours, had a good time, and then left cracking jokes. And it's like, okay, it's kind of like the John Mulaney Kid Gorgeous special. People say, are famous people nice? No, they're not nice. It's like, sometimes they are.
Sometimes they are.
Sometimes.
That is incredible. And then also, you've told me that it was time to go, and so you sort of said goodbye, and then you and the Memphis crew and Letterman went outside to wait for your Ubers and drivers, and you're on the stoop.
We just stood on the stairs for 10 minutes while he waited on his Uber to go get pizza. Yeah.
You're just hanging out with
Just hanging out, yeah. And so Billy Worley, our producer, just turned his phone on and put it, like, let's capture this conversation while we're sitting here just shooting the, talking to David Letterman.
Talking the bull to Letterman. That's incredible.
Yeah, it was fun. But that was the highlight of the interviews for me. But so we're done with the interviews, and now Laura Jean is editing it. She's been working on it for a couple of weeks.
Laura Jean Hawking,
Laura Jean
Memphis
Hawking,
editor.
Exactly. And we should have a story in about a month, and then we're going to kind of look from the story and start shooting reenactments of all Gary's story. Because this stories, the reason I did this documentary is because the stories are just amazing. Because the crux of this is, here's a man who nobody knows who he is, but regardless, because of what he's been doing for 50 years, the people he knows, his life is way more exciting than our lives are. Because it's like he hung out with Richard Pryor, you know?
Right.
He did cocaine with Richard Pryor.
Sure.
So it's like, that's just like, there's hundreds of those stories where, regardless of whether his career got to a point where he's a household name, he is happy with what he does, loves what he does, and it's a kind of a question we talk about in the film. It's like if you went to a 25-year-old comedian right now and said, look, here's how your life's going to turn out. When you're going to be 79 years old, you're still going to be on the road doing comedy. Some of the jokes probably haven't changed much in the last 25 years, but you love what you do. You're married to a former model. Would you be okay with it? Most would probably say, no, that sounds terrible.
Because I want to do comedy, and then I want to have the TV show, and then the movies.
But you hit 50, and tell me if that answer is still the same. It's like, clock's ticking, I'm running out of material. That's starting to sound pretty good. Yeah.
Y'all, he was in town for maybe a year ago, and y'all did some interviews, and then he did some stand-up at the P&H across the street. Yeah,
we got him. He had not.
And I was in the audience. I never heard of him, and it was great.
Oh, yeah. He had not done stand-up in a club in 25 years.
Really?
He's mostly clean, and he saw how comedy clubs were changing, and he just said, I want to work. He started opening for people like Johnny Mathis, and so he's been on the road with Johnny Mathis for almost 20 years.
How old is Johnny Mathis now?
In his 80s, high 80s maybe.
Yeah.
So I pitched to him. I said, "What if we got you to Memphis and you did an open mic night at the P&H?"
Yeah.
And he was like, "Yeah, let's do it." And then I thought the next day, it's got to be new material. And so I called him. I said, "It's got to be new material." He goes, "Not a chance in hell." He's like, our historian for the film is Cliff Nesteroff. He wrote this book, which has become the definitive book on stand-up comedy. I blanked on the title, but Cliff Nesteroff, fantastic book. But I told him the story, and he goes, why would he? Why would he damage his reputation? He goes, I used to be a stand-up comic, and now I've become like the authority on comedy for CNN. If I went out there and I tanked, my career's ruined. So.
Well, that's true. You want to make sure the audience is going to laugh. So, I mean, he was funny that night.
He was funny.
And I can almost guarantee you that no one in the audience had really heard those jokes before.
Yeah, totally. And that's the thing.
It was new to all of us.
He's been in show business for 50 years. He has 5 or 6 hours of material. He has some sort of combination of those same jokes, every single night. So,
and he probably drops in. Well, I'm in Memphis, so I'll say
exactly.
I was at the Memphis airport.
Exactly. But we sat him down with some local comics here and just had him just talk and pick his brain and tell stories. And then the next night we had him go up at the P&H.
Yeah, that was great at the P&H.
Yeah, it was fun. So a lot of Memphis history in this. He's in show business because of Johnny Cash. He grew up just idolizing Johnny Cash. His first night in show business, he had learned 12 Johnny Cash songs, played it in a bar in Deadwood, South Dakota, played his Johnny Cash songs, and he said every time he would hit a B7 chord, he would make a mistake because he was still learning the guitar.
Sure.
So the audience would like turn around when he made a mistake, and he panicked and he told a joke. And everyone thought it was part of the act, and they went back to it, and he played again, he messed up, same thing, and he'd tell a joke. That's how he became a stand-up comic. And then 2 hours later, after that first gig that night, a madam brothels were legal at the time in South Dakota. And she said, "What are you doing?" And he goes,
Are they illegal now?
In South Dakota, I guess.
Maybe so.
We went up to Deadwood. Deadwood's like it's like Walmart of casinos. It is squeaky clean and gross.
Okay.
But his first night show he goes back and performs for the Johns while the women perform, doing the same Johnny Cash songs, making a mistake, telling a joke. So yeah, interesting career. Excited about the documentary. Didn't mean to ramble on for 48 minutes.
Yeah, usually we're trying to keep this show between 10 and 12.
Sorry.
And I'm not sure how long it is, but it's a perfect interview because I'm excited that Memphis people are doing this.
Yeah.
And that y'all have got access to Alice Cooper, David Letterman, Steve Martin. I mean, it's going to be an amazing documentary.
I think it's going to be an entertaining film, and I mean, like I said, it poses a lot of questions about what is success. Is if you're happy at what you do, and you're not the star you had aspirations to be. I think that's.
But you're still in that orbit.
Yeah.
You're not the sun, but you're
totally
in the orbit.
And I asked Letterman that question about him, and he said he's respected by everybody who's ever seen him. Every comedian, I can't name a comedian that's not respected by him. He's loved. Is he a success? Yes, he's a success.
Yeah, well, that's true.
It's like, well put. Mr. Letterman.
Letterman, exactly. Well, Bart, now's the time that I like to do a thing called
Moments with Mark.
That is true.
That's why I'm here, Mark.
That is why you're here.
That is the only reason I'm here.
Glean whatever is happening in my head.
I am tickled to be a part of this.
Well, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Hello, and this is time for Moment with Mark. We have a lot of empty mall space. The Oak Court Mall has some empty areas. Southland Mall on Shelby Drive has a lot of empty space. I'm proposing that we do something like put some schools in those empty buildings next to the mall. And that would help the malls themselves, because you got a lot of high school kids or junior high kids and their parents coming by, picking them up, and they've got some coin in their pocket. And so they can go to the mall. I know Memphis State, or as the kids call it these days, the University of Memphis, is looking to expand their school. They have the campus school, and they're trying to find a place for it. Maybe the Oak Court Mall is nearby. Perhaps they have an empty department store or empty space that could be converted into a classroom. And they got a city park right across the street for the recess, and the Theater Memphis is right there as well if the kids want to take some acting classes. So let's look at turning our malls into schools, or a hybrid of school and shops. And like I said, it should help the shops that are there, because you've got the school kids with the money, they can go spend it. Thank you. All right, Bart, I appreciate you coming by. You're the first guest on season 2.
Glad to be here, Mark. It was fun. Had a good time. Hope I didn't ruin your first show.
Nothing. Well, I say you're the first guest. You may end up being the. You're the first guest. He's the first guest. So very good. Well, thanks everyone for watching. Support local artists. Support musicians and filmmakers, and support documentary filmmakers like Mr. Bart Shannon. Good night.
I got some news. Well, I'm